Hey Ben, how are
Hello,
you?
I'm good. I'm good. Am I
I'm
good?
very
I'm good.
yeah, are you
Yeah.
good? I'm very excited to for this episode because I get to introduce you to someone who I met at TED last year and has become a very special guest and friend of this show. And
Uh,
I'm excited that they're returning. Um and I just think this is a conversation. I mean, I desperately need this conversation right now, and I think you might too, and I think our listeners might. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest today.
go for it.
She is an incredible writer, a teacher, Katharine K. Wilkinson. She is back to talk to us about her new concept and book called Climate Wayfinding. And this is going to be, I think, a really interesting conversation because it's really about how we can navigate some of that anxiety and fear and distress around the realities of climate change, and really a practical conversation. Because I think sometimes we can talk about it in theory, but then it's like, okay, so I get it, but what do I do about it? Like, yeah, I feel those things, but what do I do about it? And I think Catherine is going to take us through some of that. Her book's got some of that. And we're going to be talking about like this like emotional landscape we're all in and this new framework she's got of climate wayfinding. And I'm just excited because I think we can feel really exhausted and lost sometimes. And to have someone who is, who's really thought about these things deeply with us is going to be very special.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a timely conversation.
Very much so. Should we get
Yeah.
started?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Hi, Catherine.
Hello, friends.
Hello.
We are so excited for you to be here. I'm for people listening, you're not gonna know this, but I'm gonna show you a little rock that I made at Catherine's amazing workshop,
Yeah.
in Vancouver, and it says belonging
Mm.
on it, and I love it so much. Um, and we're gonna get into all of that, but let's start with a number that I really really like and go from there. So right now, some really amazing data has come out recently, right? That like 89% of people around the world want their government to act on climate. And I think that's a really exciting number. And yet, when we actually think about it, and I think about people around me, people would feel emotionally paralyzed. Like just
Mm.
like how can we have so like we people care and yet we don't know what to do? And I'm just wondering, like, is that how you're feeling? Is that how you see people around yourself feeling? Like, let's start at that moment of like this, maybe we call it burnout, I don't know.
So I think this is really the perfect place to start, Maryam, because wherever we are on our climate journeys, whether we are newly curious to lean into the umbrella of our of our conversation,
Love it.
or we've been in the work a long time, I think we can all understand that feeling of stuckness, right? That often arises, I think, out of a mix of distress, of overwhelm, of feeling maybe too small to matter, maybe that nothing we do could possibly put a dent in the 50 some odd gigatons of greenhouse pollution that our global economy is producing every year. And I think in some ways that feeling is really rational, right? Like
Mm.
we are really small in the grand sweep of this enormous planet. And the fact that human society is creating the climate crisis tells us that we are also not too small to matter, right? The very fact that this problem is a problem tells us that we have the power to change things. And so I think we need spaces and practices and support for holding that question of what can I do or what can I do now, next, more deeply, that are generative, right? That don't just keep us swirling in that wondering, but actually help us work with it, right? It's a powerful question that often has lots of other questions, I think, kind of nested within it, like a Russian doll about purpose and meaning and belonging. And when we can go into the weeds of the questions, I think we can find our way towards pathways of participation and contribution that are really potent.
Do you think that, I mean, do you think that for a long time because I definitely have felt this in other issues I've worked on. Like I've worked in
Mm.
human rights, I've worked on Iranian human rights activism and immigration and refugee and all this different stuff. And there's this feeling of like, we don't have time for you to have feelings. Like this is really, this is really urgent. And, or you say it to yourself, like, this is selfish. Like, why am I'm not the one being thrown in jail. I'm not the one, doing what I don't have time to be thinking about my emotions and my mental health. I've got to do the work. Do you think climate suffers from a similar way of being?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a bit of like, who are we to need to feel our feelings when there's this really urgent challenge, whatever it may be, or many urgent challenges all colliding at once. And I often go back to just a few simple words from Audre Lorde, that our feelings are our most genuine sources of knowledge, our most powerful sources of knowledge. And so I think if we say like, there's no time to feel our feelings, we're actually skipping a really important like somatic intelligence step, right? Which is that the things we are feeling have really important information to share, and they have really important fuel that can be tapped into. But I think that depends on not sort of like shifting them off to the side as something inconvenient, but actually honoring that they are at the heart of the work that we might do, the action that we might take. And there's a danger, right, when we just sort of shove the feelings aside and don't engage with them, which is that they generate that sense of paralysis and stuckness, right? They generate the burnout. They can actually show up in the work in really unhelpful ways, right? I think we can all imagine moments where we've been in an interaction with a change agent, movement leader of some kind, where you're like, woof, that really feels like, that doesn't feel like it's coming from like the healthiest place, right? And so it actually becomes, I think, a source of risk for movements that have like long arcs of work to do. And really importantly, like we've got to do it in relational webs. And so much of our emotional kind of wherewithal and intelligence and capacity has to do with whether we can form those relationships of trust and support that are so important for collective action.
Katharine, you and I have never met before, and so I'm super interested in like why you care about this. Like I don't, because I always feel like that people like write books about things for a range of different reasons. I'm super interested to know like what brought you to this conversation. Does it come from a personal place, or does it come from like years of observing something around you, or is there like some kind of moment that pushed you into talking about this kind of stuff?
Ben, are you thinking about like climate generally or this nexus specifically?
I was thinking about this nexus specifically, but I would love for you to tell me about both, if you don't mind. We've got time.
We've got some time. Sure. Well, I think this nexus in particular about, I think of it as like how we cultivate the human capacity that's needed for this moment. That frankly grew out of like 25 years of zigzagging around different spaces of climate engagement and climate work, and feeling pretty consistently like, wow, we've got like amazing science and we're developing incredible policy and we're running brilliant campaigns, and somehow we're not doing like an amazing job of tending to the people who make all of that possible, right? Like without us, none of it happens, or it runs out of steam along the way. And so I think I found myself looking for spaces to like deeply reflect, to get re-energized, to renew, to kind of cultivate fresh ideas, to build those relationships that I think have a lot to do with what keeps us in social change over time. And I was often going to places that were like adjacent to climate, right? Like I didn't see a lot of it happening within the movement itself. And frankly, if we understand that there is a leadership crisis at the heart of the climate crisis, among many drivers, then we've got to be really serious and really intentional and really invested in that cultivation of leadership, because, we're up against really powerful interests with tons of resources. And I don't know what the theory of change looks like if it's not like a huge upwelling of people. And to your point, Maryam, a huge translation of that 89% of people who care and want to see action and are worried into engagement in every corner of human society.
Where did you go? Like, where were the spaces that you went to? Because in my mind, like I work in gender equality, and I often think, particularly in masculinities, like, considering we're all men talking about this stuff, we're not very good at doing the practice of looking after ourselves. So like, I always wonder like where people go for that kind of stuff, like in terms of, I guess, sectors. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting, Ben, because one of the places that I went at one juncture was to do work with a group called Inside Circle, which grew out of a men's group in New Folsom Prison in California. And you would think, like, why would you go there to do your climate work? But what was so fascinating to me, I did a kind of long weekend retreat with them. And a lot of times what I understood from those men is that the most easily accessible emotion for men in the New Folsom Circle was anger, was rage. And a lot of times there was a lot of like burning through the anger and the rage to get to the other feelings that sit beneath it, right? For me, climate crisis, ecological unraveling, what it's doing to our communities sends me into a place of deep grief. And grief can be like, really thick molasses. Like it can just sort of suck you in and hold you down. And what I learned in that circle was like they sort of provoked me, these men, and they helped me move from grief into the sort of like burn it out kind of anger vibes that actually then left me back in a place of feeling like, okay, like my courage is sort of like fired back up, and I'm ready to roll. So that was one example. I did another retreat this was years ago now, over a decade ago now, with a Quaker author and teacher, Parker Palmer, who every year would run a circle for quote unquote young leaders and activists. And again, that was not a climate specific space, but there was this shared ground, whatever we were working on, whether it was education or public health, that people came in like sort of barely with any, to use a fossil fuel metaphor, gas left in the tank, right? And feeling like, again, in all of those spaces, we're short on kind of this access to support and renewal with one another.
I hear that. I always hear so much about the Quakers. After I come to one of your retreats, I'm gonna go and check out the Quakers, because apparently they get it. They're pretty good at.
Listen, the Quakers, like we did a practice on that retreat called a clearness committee. Have you heard about this, Ben? Okay, so this is a practice that like Quakers have been doing since, like before the Industrial Revolution, I think. And it's basically like there's one person, Ben, maybe you arrive and you've got a big question you're holding or a big decision you're trying to make. And this is a structure to just help you be in deeper dialogue with yourself. So, 4 or 5 or 6 others would be there in a circle. You share what you're grappling with. And then their entire job is to offer you generous questions that can help you be in that deeper conversation with yourself. No advising, no interpreting, just offering questions. And if they serve you, great, you pick them up and you sort of talk through them to them, the questions. And if they don't, you just like let them float on down the stream. And I found that to be like the simplest kind of technology, if you will, but like the most profound experience of human generosity, both ways, right? Because people find it to be incredibly generous for you to share deeply what's going on with you, and to be someone who's been grappling alone, to suddenly be held in that way in community is like really extraordinary. And it's not rocket science, right? It's like, we could just do this anywhere, anytime. You know?
I like that. It's like a therapeutic party. That's a good one.
Yeah. So the Quakers, I know, they're like, yeah, we got tools for this.
We'll help you.
I like the idea that you kind of went around to things that are not just in your own like space, world, industry, whatever you want to call it, to find like ways forward. I just feel like that in and of itself is so important, and maybe can help if people are feeling stuck, that maybe the solutions don't like, or they're not the solutions, but the path forward doesn't lie here.
Yeah, where you've been,
what you're
already.
doing.
Yeah. And I'm really passionate that we can cultivate more of this like right within the climate movement. And I'm certainly not by any stretch the only person thinking about this. There's an amazing partnership that Christiana Figueres and Global Optimism built with Plum Village, which is the engaged Buddhist community of Thich Nhat Hanh. And they've got an amazing online course called Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. And they've been holding retreats for climate and nature leaders. I just think that work is extraordinary and so important. And it's still like a kind of an outlier, right? That I joined a retreat with them last year, and I thought, this is one of the most like loving, caring experiences I've ever had in climate work. And that is amazing. And it's a little bit sad, right? That we should feel like we're loving and caring for each other along this journey, because this is hard work to do. It's hard to show up for a big existential crisis every day.
Yeah, it's not easy. I'm so interested also to know what you think climate anxiety looks like in 2026. Because I feel like when we started this podcast, it was very like, to me, I understood climate anxiety as like information overwhelm. Do you know what I mean? Like it was just, there's too much information. I don't know what's going on. And so I feel anxious. But it feels like maybe it's changed into like it's morphed into something slightly different. Like you've mentioned anger and you've mentioned grief, which definitely feel like they are more a part of it than they were 4 years ago.
I think that heady scramble that you're talking about, Ben, I think that's still totally part of it, right? That there's just and often the kind of climate conversation we're being invited into still is often a very heady conversation. Let me give you some science, give you some facts, here's some more bad news coming your way, right?
It's bad.
There's still a lot of graphs. There's a lot of graphs. And I think as the climate crisis continues, more and more people have had a personal experience, right, with extreme weather, with the losses that come with fire, with storms, right? Like it's touching us, I think, more intimately, because the problem is getting worse and it's showing up everywhere. So I think that's part of it. And I think that all of the work around like climate accountability, right? Like, why are we in this mess? Who has been making decisions that have gotten us into this very snarly situation? Like that provokes the anger, the rage, the sense of betrayal, right? Is one thing that we hear in polling of young people, that they feel betrayed by the leaders of business and government, et cetera. And that to me makes sense, right? Because it's not like, oh, drat. Turns out all of this burning of fossil fuels is a problem. We have known this for longer than I've been alive, right? And so, but that was, as Al Gore has said, an inconvenient truth, right? So there was all of this very deliberate, very well-funded work to confuse us, to dissuade, leaders from action, to buy out politicians. And that should piss us off because we didn't have to be where we are. And now we've all got to find our way through this.
Yeah, it's like all the feelings you have when you realize you've been lied
all
to for ages, right? It's like just a horrible, horrible soup
and then,
of emotion.
You layer on a little bit of authoritarianism, you layer on global violence and conflict, right? And then, climate is just one of kind of what I think feels like a bit of a gathering chaos to a lot of people. Ooh, what a time to be alive.
I mean, I think it just sounds so familiar, what you're describing. I think it probably will to a lot of people, and I think it makes you tired.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I have felt.
Yeah.
Recently,
Exhaustion.
particularly for a long time. It's just this, it's a constant barrage. And I think that's one of the things that, maybe in my darker moments, I feel is deliberate. Like, I feel like I get this, and maybe that's where it comes from, that anger and place of blaming, where you feel like, well, of course they're trying to wear us down. Of course they're trying to make us tired, because when we're tired and we're sad and we're frustrated, we just can't do.
Right. Right.
And whether it's deliberate or not, it does feel like very convenient for kind of the forces that maybe are not having our planet's best, us and our planet's, interests at heart, that we're starting to feel this way.
Totally.
Last time, Katharine, we had you on this podcast, you and I, you were talking.
I know, what a lucky little duckling to get to come and do this twice.
2 times.
Well, no, for me, what a lucky person that I got to do is talk to you twice. I feel like today is a day I need this conversation. We talked about the concept of climate wayfinding, and for those of you who haven't heard that episode, I recommend you go back and you listen to it. The episode is called what is it called? Hold on, I have it here. Oh yeah, the episode is called How to Find Your Climate Foothold. So go back and do that. But you've got a new book. It's coming out. It's one of the reasons we get to talk to you, and
Congratulations.
we're talking about this concept of. Yeah.
It just came. Just this so one exciting. Little advance copy. I know, because when we spoke, I hadn't taken a sabbatical yet to write it. So a lot has happened. A lot has happened since then.
Finishing a book is a big deal. Holding it in your hands is a big deal. So first of all, congratulations on that.
Yeah, well done.
Thanks, friend.
And
thanks.
Sorry. But I want to. So the book is called Climate Wayfinding, right? Tell us about this concept and how you came to it.
So, we were just unpacking this, like, what are these sources of climate anxiety, right? And the way that I sometimes sum it up is that it feels like we are living increasingly in a world where our maps don't work. And that is true quite literally, right? As like coastlines slip beneath rising seas, it's true as, an entire town or neighborhood can go up in flames, a forest can be razed, right? Like literally our maps are having a hard time, I think, keeping up with the ways that change is unfolding physically on the planet. But I think we also feel the way that other kinds of maps, right? Our inherited family maps, our cultural maps, our social maps, our maps that, whether consciously or unconsciously, we've used to navigate the questions of human existence, right? That they kind of aren't quite meeting the moment. And I, we can and should continue to have maps. Maps are a helpful thing. But I think we're actually in a moment where we need to really build our navigational muscles, so to speak, like our capacities for orienting and continuing to find our way in a world that's just going to keep changing and is going to be changing at such a rapid pace. And so that's kind of where the idea of climate wayfinding comes from, that like we're finding ourselves at unexpected crossroads and trying to figure out like which way do I turn, which path do I take. And before this was a book, it was a program. So I run the All We Can Save project, which grew out of another book, All We Can Save, an anthology of writings by women climate leaders.
Which, if you have not read this book, I just want you to put it on your list to read.
Oh, thanks.
It is absolutely incredible. Okay, sorry.
It is a really special book, I have to say. Essays, poetry, art, like all the good stuff is in there. So climate wayfinding became a program that we ran at the All We Can Save project. And then over the last couple of years, we've trained about 90 facilitators from something like 75 colleges and universities across the US and Canada to take that program and run it with young people who I think are among the many of us who are grappling in this maps coming up short situation. And it's been really exciting to see how this process that we use of looking inward with care, looking outward with curiosity, and looking forward with courage can take people from that place of feeling stuck, really murky, really overwhelmed, into a sense of clarity, direction, possibility, maybe even a little joy. And as you said, Maryam, finding those footholds for action going forward.
Oh, I feel like when you're talking, I can feel like wisdom permeating from your body. Do you know what I mean? Like you just feel so wise. You feel like you know what you're talking about, which I love. I personally really enjoy. I'm so interested in like how did you figure this out? Like when did you has it been this way the whole time for you? Have you always seen it like this, or is this a journey that's like evolved and changed for you over time?
Well, first of all, Ben, I have to say, I can't imagine a better compliment than being wise, or someone who gives off the air of wise.
And that is the wise answer.
I'm really moved. I'm really moved. So thank you. I think in a lot of ways, this program and this book is kind of a knitting together of what I have learned, discovered, often like tried for myself along this path, and also brings in some practices that I've learned from others that have been incredibly generative. So part of this was creation, and a lot of it, I think, was synthesis. Whether, take something like this idea of kindred community, right? Of who's out there that feels like, we're in some way kind of traveling in the same direction. People that we might get into what my late Congressman John Lewis called good trouble, necessary trouble. And I did, like years ago, I did this sort of like creative mapping exercise of what my kindred community and what my sort of context for action look like. That's been, evolved and adapted as an exercise in the book. There's an amazing woman, Nikki Silvestri, who has been an advisor for the All We Can Save project. And she taught me a practice of kind of visioning work that is out on a 3-year horizon, which turns out to be a really unlocking period of time, right? Far enough out that things are possible, not so far that like you can't actually get there. There's an adaptation of that visioning practice in the book. So it's a range of things, but I'm like a recovering social scientist as well. And so I often kind of think in frameworks. And so that inward, outward, forward is a framework in the book. There's another framework that we call the 8 dynamics of climate engagement, which again tries to kind of bring into, comprehensible form, like what are the things that actually do help us not just engage on climate, but do it in deep, sustained, and courageous ways. So there's a lot of that kind of, I don't know, simplifying architecture, maybe that's in the book. And all of it has been really thoroughly tested because we've run this program now with hundreds of people. There are facilitators running it in dozens of places, and we're learning a lot. Almost every week we get more data back from participants in the program. So it's not just like, here, I think this might help you. Here it is in a book.
Try this.
I think it's always good to know, like you're getting something that is like a proven process, right? And there may be parts of it that really work for some people, and there may be parts that others are like, oh, that's a little too woo, or that's a little too, whatever. But I think there are some things generative here for just about anyone.
It's one of the things I love about, I don't read loads of books. It's one of the things I love about books is that like when you have a book in your hand, to you, it's like, I paid $7.99 for this book and I've got it. But it's like a person's whole life experience and years years of all of the stuff that they've learned, lived through, studied, researched goes into this book. Is there like is there a framework that was like, is there one that you like more than all the others? Is there one that was like the hardest one to learn?
Like a favorite, a favorite of all of these? I don't know if this was the hardest to learn, but I think it is the one that like brings me the most delight. And this is from the session in the program or the chapter in the book that's about offering our superpowers. Like, how do we get clearer about our gifts, our talents, like the unique magic that we have to offer? And this again is something I did for myself years ago. And I was like, okay, like basically we want to be more like life force, right? Like we want to be more like this amazing life that is just making more life on this planet. And what is that? And I was like, I think at the human level, that is something like a nexus of power and joy. So not like hierarchical structural power, but that feeling of like power kind of welling up within you. And then joy, right? Delight, bliss even. And I was like, I think when I'm like operating, doing something, experiencing something, and I've got that sense of power and joy happening, like that might be my most useful, beneficial contribution, right? Like, not that those are the only things I do. Like, sometimes you just got to do the laundry or whatever.
Cook that chicken, yeah.
But like a little more power, a little more joy, like the more you can be in that space. And that's been such a fun one to see unlock things for people in the program. Like, I remember our very first in-person pilot. There was a woman who worked at a big environmental NGO, and she was kind of a junior staff member there. And in the sharing after we did this guided meditation and creative mapping, she said, at first I thought it might be possible that I've never felt power. And then I thought about how it feels to throw a Frisbee. Right? And it's like, you think that throwing a Frisbee has nothing to do with climate, right? Like what? But actually that sort of somatic intelligence of like, oh yeah, I know how that feels in my body. Okay, then I can start to tap into other things that maybe like aren't quite as juicy as that, but like take me in that direction. And then joy is interesting, right? Because similar to what you were saying, Maryam, about like, how can we take the time to, go be in our feels? Like, who am I to feel joy when there's so much harm that is just like rolling every freaking day? And yet joy, I think, has so much to do with how we keep going, right? And if we like close off joy, also, how will we ever throw a party anyone wants to come to, right? Like, and that's the whole thing about a movement, is you're trying to get people to come in and participate, right? And contribute. And if it all just seems like dour, finger wagging, graph showing, whatever, it's like, why would you want to do climate? That seems horrible.
No one's coming to the party, yeah.
No.
Nobody.
Is there something, because I mean, what I get, the sense I get about this book is that it's a deeply practical book as well as being like thoughtful and giving people a chance to reflect. It also allows you to actually like be active, maybe is a better word to think about it. And I'm just wondering, what would you really love for people to take away once they've read it? Like, what is your like dream scenario as an author for people who read this book?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, you are exactly right. I feel like I can say this, having written and edited a number of books that are just books you read. This is very much a book that you can do, also that you can play with. It's got, journaling prompts for free writing, and it's got, these interactive frameworks, and it's got what we call step out exercises. So kind of things to do beyond the page if you want to. You could absolutely just sit down and read it. Hopefully, you'll find beautiful essays and beautiful poetry, and that'll be delightful. But I think my biggest hope is that this is a book that people read and do together. So when All We Can Save came out, I designed something called All We Can Save Circles, which was a kind of reading group experience, and people like journeyed through that together. And some of those circles from 5-6 years ago are still continuing, or they've grown from 4 people into, for example, in Atlanta, there's now a network of like 600 women in sustainability that started with a little All We Can Save circle during the pandemic. And in this book, I built reading group agendas, what we call gather agendas, right into every chapter. So you can go and read it, you can do those free writing prompts, and then you can come together with friends or colleagues or collaborators and hopefully have a very different kind of experience. And going back to Ben, like my searching for where can I find these spaces of nourishment and support adjacent to climate, this is meant to equip people to create those very spaces. And it's pretty, the agendas are simple. You don't need to be like an expert facilitator to be able to run them. But ultimately, I think they do not just like tending the emotional, spiritual root of this work, but tending the relational root of it also. That's the dream, like thousands of reading circles. That's the dream.
Yeah, I love that. And I love this idea that, and I think, Ben, you and I have maybe a part of our whole lives have been this. I don't know what to speak for you, but if you can't find...
you guys are so cute.
If you can't find the space, you can create it. Like,
you have to make it.
I think it's really unlocking, and it's really powerful the moment you realize that, you know what? Sometimes those spaces don't exist, but there is nothing stopping you making them. And all of those things you think that are in the way are actually not in the way, because no one expects you to build like a movement of 1 million people, whatever, in like 2 minutes. But like 6 people sitting around a kitchen table can all of a sudden feel like community and belonging in a way that you never even imagined. And then there's so much that can come from that.
Totally. And these kinds of spaces that like seem really small in the face of like the scale of planetary disruption, when we look at social movement history, we see how important these small, intimate, deep spaces are, right? If we want those big moments of like the march with 1 million people or, or the big kind of legislative win or whatever it might be, where a lot of that begins is in these kinds of often invisible, smaller spaces that, we can all contribute to cultivating.
I think it's just so hard for people to believe that, but it's one of the reasons kind of you said earlier, you joked earlier that you're like a recovering social scientist, but it's it's one it's one of the things I love about you as an author writing this kind of book is that it's not just your experience. It's not just the experience of these hundreds of groups and people that have gone out, but it's the experience of you looking around at history and at movements and bringing it all together, and like we get to benefit from that. It's like what Ben said, is like you buy a book for whatever a book costs in this case. I know wildly vary, and you get
£700.
so and you get so much. I mean, I think that's kind of incredible.
Yeah, super powerful, super powerful. Is there like the answer to this I feel is going to be no. I feel that maybe you've already answered this in a way that is much more open, but is there like a specific action that you hope comes, or a movement that you hope is birthed out of people gathering around their kitchen tables and reading this book or having the conversation together? Is there like a vision of the future that you imagine coming from this?
I mean, I really hope this is, I hope this book is like a little bundle of nourishment that kind of circuits through like the mycelial web of the climate community, right? That like, I don't know that it's about like big new this or a fresh vision as much as it is like sending goodness into the people and the places and the efforts and the campaigns that are already in motion or already being contemplated. Like it might unlock some totally new things and fantastic. But I think it's really about, like that mycelial web kind of caring for itself. I think if people felt stronger and clearer and more connected and more courageous in their engagement with climate, from like the tiniest step to, the biggest undertaking, I think that would be really amazing. Because we don't have any shortage of people who care. But we do have a shortage of people who are able to turn care into contribution and do that again and again and again over time.
Yeah. And it feels like a big permission giving exercise, right? Like to me, this strikes me as one of those issues that everybody cares about because it impacts everyone, but people feel like it's maybe a bad thing to care too openly about the well-being of people in a movement, for example, and maybe that's an important thing, is just somebody to be able to say, no, you can care about this, and this is how you do it in community with other people. I'm also interested, I guess, for our listeners, for the people that already, so we have like different audiences that listen to this podcast, but for the audience that are already engaged, they're active, they're doing stuff.
Yeah.
What do you have any top tips? First tip is get the book, obviously. Second tip, third tip, fourth tip. Do you have any ideas of how people can start to create those spaces in their communities for supporting emotional resilience, or alongside doing the work? How do we look after ourselves and each other?
Yeah, I think I want to affirm that for a lot of us who've kind of like grown up in this space or in this movement, like we often got a lot of investment around what we know. And
Yeah.
we didn't often get as much investment in like, how do we be
Yeah.
in this, right? And so, I think for anyone who's feeling like, I might I might have some some work to do there. Like, yeah, me too. Me too. And so I think, if you kind of journey through this book and the practices in this book solo, or you do them with others, you will come away with approaches and practices that like you can continue to use over time. And again, like some of that is small stuff, like a 5-minute guided meditation where we're invited to like greet our climate emotions and not try to like shove them away, can be really useful. And then in the future, when you find yourself in a space of like, I think there's some emotional matter, right? Like in this space, and we need to work with it. You could come back to that, right? If you've got a team, let's say, that you're working with, and it's like, what do we need? Like, what do we need to be doing for each other right now? You can check in on those 8 dynamics of climate engagement and have a conversation. Like, oh wow, we're feeling really strong on like our connection to one another, but man, we're feeling super low on possibility, power, and joy. So how do we then invest in that? And I just think, like, whoever you are, wherever you are, if you've got people that you're doing this work with, kind of taking on, I know it's like, oh my God, are you seriously adding one more thing to this infinite to-do list that I've got? But like, if you're willing to kind of take on, like, trying to, be the person who says, let's make some space for that. And I don't have to figure it out. Like, I can tap into this resource that already exists, that's been so thoroughly tested and honed, and see what's here that might work for us.
Love it.
I just got very sort of excited and distracted because there are these resident red-tailed hawks that live around my condo in Atlanta, and one of them just zoomed across, and the chapter in the book about power and joy opens with a scene of one of these hawks, and the way, like, every time I see them, I'm like, all right, power and joy, like that's like life force in motion.
Incredible.
These hawks.
Oh, how beautiful. I want to ask a question that I don't know if you want to include in this. This is one of my questions that may have nothing to do with anything, and Josie and Ben might cut out of this, but I wonder if you have any advice or any experience that you would want to share, because around this, one of the things I see it in lots of movements, and I see it in the climate movement, is how we spend a lot of time tearing each other down. And it feels like such a waste of time. Like, I mean, a waste of time, not in like a dismissive way, but I mean, time is so finite, and we have so much important work to do, and yet we use it like, I mean, I hate to use military analogies. I hate it, but it's friendly fire. Like, it is just for me.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, like, you have been between, all the work you've done with your organization, with this book, with your previous book, like, you've seen this movement, and you must have you've come across this. What is your advice for people who are in that space because it can also be another thing that turns people off, right? Where they just say, I did not sign up for this, I'm out.
Totally. I mean, I'll tell you, in the spirit of just, I don't know, maybe saying too much. My wonderful partner will has observed a lot of the inner workings of the climate movement, right? From like my Zoom calls and whatever, just like being in the space,
On the sidelines,
from the sidelines. And I remember him saying one time some years ago, like, man, that will make you not want to be involved. Right. And it is that friendly fire. It is that tearing each other down. And I think there's probably some like built-in danger of people who are drawn to social change movement work of any kind, right? Which is that like you're super convicted, you're super motivated, you've got a sense of what is right, capital RIGHT, and somebody else who does that differently is capital WRONG, wrong, and like this is the kind of thing that comes up, right? And I think often that is one of those spaces where we see like, the kind of lack of emotional work and tending, like spurting out like a problematic geyser. You know what I mean? And I get it. Like we all feel like there is so much at stake. We all feel like there are some theories of change that are better than others. We all, like I get that. And we have got to be able to hold those conversations with more care and more generosity and frankly, more effing listening. Right? Like that is one of it sounds so simple, but is like such a core practice to climate wayfinding is deep listening. When we run the program, and if you do reading groups, we do this practice of trios. Like the three of us could be in a trio and Maryam, for let's say 3 minutes, you would just speak on what had arisen for you through an exercise or a free write. And the only role that Ben and I have is just to generously listen. And it's extraordinary how unusual that experience is.
Yeah.
Right? It's extraordinary. And if we can't listen to each other, like we're screwed. Right? Like that's table stakes.
Yeah, what we actually doing.
Yeah. And to be able to listen even when what we're hearing maybe is like causing discomfort or sending up an alarm bell, or we're like, that's not right, but to be able to stay in it and to remember that, I mean, my goodness, almost anyone who is signing up for this work is doing it, with motivations that are going to feel pretty darn similar to our own. Right. And so how do we stick together? And I think, unfortunately, the anti-climate forces of the world are a lot better, actually, at like sticking with each other and not throwing each other under the bus and not dragging each other through the public square. Like I was thinking recently about, of all strange places, Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia in the US, where like I went on an elementary school field trip and like we were like, oh, this is so funny. Like you put your feet in the stocks, and like take pictures and it's goofy and whatever. But like we still have that instinct of putting people in the stocks and then like circling around them and mocking and jeering and like, whoa, guys. Like if we see it in that way, I think it's like, okay, we gotta take a beat here. Like this is not useful in any way for the mission that we share.
Thank you so much.
You could wind me up on that for a minute, clearly.
I think it's so important, and it just listening. I mean, how simple and yet how difficult, because we do care. And I think that idea that we're all trying to do the same thing, and actually if we just listen a bit more, it can be really transformative, and it's a free thing to do. Like you can just do it.
Yeah.
It's in your power to do this.
Totally. And then, right, like there are aspects of this work where we like the answers are not simple, right? And we need to have the capacity for dialogue and, maybe even debate. But if we've cultivated some trust, if we've cultivated that listening, we've cultivated more emotional knowing, then we're able to do those pieces in a more helpful way. And so it's not to say it's all just kumbaya and we don't no, we've got to talk about what do we do about geoengineering and the people who are proposing this as a solution? This is an important, thing to dig into where people may have really different perspectives, but we've got to have, that kind of human current that runs through it.
Katharine, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast.
My
and
pleasure.
Sharing this with us. I mean, it has been, I can't tell you how much I needed this conversation today. And I know that people listening are going to feel the same way. And we don't do this a lot, but I would just like to tell everyone to go buy this book.
Yeah,
I just
actually,
think it's
I'm
really
going to buy
important.
it.
Yeah, and Ben does not read. So
yeah, you've sold me. You've sold me.
But Ben, you have a pretty great library.
Don't worry about that. That's aesthetic. These
are just books hanging. Just
some
hanging
of them are
out.
Yeah. So Katharine, your book, Climate Wayfinding, Healing Ourselves and the Planet We Call Home, is launching in May of this year. We will link to it in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time and your generosity with this. It's I think it's what people need.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you all so much for, as ever, just a really enlivening conversation. You've made my day.
Thank you for joining us this week. We really hope you enjoyed this episode.
If you did, please hit the follow button to make sure that you get next week's release. While you're at it, please leave a rating and a review.
Now, let's shout out to our fabulous team behind the pod.
Executive produced by Josie Colter.
Produced by Ben Beheshty.
Music also by Ben Beheshty.
Communications by Tara Cooper and Izzy Gladstone.
Curation by Deesha Chandra.
Hosted by Ben Hurst.
And Maryam Pasha.
And remember,
stay curious.